Hey, I'm Paul Maxwell, CEO of RevOps HQ. We're a HubSpot Solutions partner, and today we're going to walk through the process of mapping and performing a data migration in a way that can also convert into an integration. It's really a matter of setting up system mapping, object mapping, and field mapping, and then determining the normalization rules as well as the integration or mapping rules for each of those systems, objects, and fields. So before we get into this, what we have to do is, on a large scale, define what the process is, which is we define the data, we define the rules, and then we prove the move through doing a little migration and then a big one once we agree that it works. And at a high level, this image shows what we do, which is take source system 1, source system 2, and bring them into a target system. Sometimes there's one system, sometimes there's two, sometimes there's many. So the big question is, how do we reconcile all of these sources and all of these different record types from these systems and bring them into a target system? So terms we have to define before doing the work. We have our primary key. So this is a unique key that identifies a specific object. I have a foreign key, which is a field on a primary key, field on a table that is another object's primary key. So one object can reference another. An association table is a table that stores links between records. So it's a table that stores, for example, 10 records that have the same primary key, and each record has a different foreign key. Okay. So that would be a list of one record being associated to 10 other different objects. Then you have a match key. A match key is the field or fields used to decide whether records from different systems represent the same entity. Then you have a soft match. This is when no match key exists. A soft match is a non-exact match using normalized fields and an approved threshold. Field mapping is an exercise we're going to see in a moment where we take a source field and we map it to a target field, as well as the instructions for how to convert the data from the source field into the target field, the type of field that we are bringing it from in the source and targeting to in the target, any transformation rules that need to occur, how we handle blank values, and then who owns that. And then finally, any transformation rule. A transformation rule is the logic that changes a source value into the target's required structure or allowed value. And then finally, the source of truth, which is the system or rule allowed to supply or overwrite a field during an ongoing integration. So we're going to go through this exact document, which is going to take us through all of the object keys that exist, all of the field mapping that has to exist, how we match or merge, how we define relationships, how we perform data hygiene. We have our record or our list of migration runs, and then finally our integration, which allows us to do that, as well as our tests, recon, and our lists. Okay, so here's the exact process in order of running a full migration. And an integration is just kind of a migration that happens over and over again from one system to another or between two systems. But a migration is where you move data from one system to another system, okay, or from multiple systems to another system. So here's our exact process in order. Number one, you identify source systems and source objects. Number two, you identify target systems and target objects. Number three, you identify the PK or the primary key candidates in every single object. Number four, you identify the associations between those objects to preserve and the required association tables that we need to create in order to preserve those associations. So what associations need to be migrated? Finally, we choose the exact match IDs. Okay, so what are the IDs that match between source system 1 and source system 2 to bring into the target system? So for example, if we have individuals in source system 1 and individuals in source system 2, we have to be able to have a way to match them. Is the match key the primary key? Not always. Sometimes it might be. Sometimes it might be something else. Number 6, if we don't have any match IDs or match keys, we define soft matching or update source data to create or normalize a UID for ourselves. We'll look at that more in a moment. Number 7, we map fields and define the transformation rules. Number 8, if we're moving to an integration, we choose, is this a one-way or a two-way integration? And this can be determined on a field level. Number 9, so for example, one field might be one way, one field might be the other way, another field might be two-way. Number 9, we define field level source of truth, overwrite, and timing rules. Number 10, we choose event-based updates or polling. So do we want this to update as soon? So do we want, for example, if it's an integration, for values to update in one system as soon as they update in the other system? Or do we want every 5 minutes, both systems to be synchronized according to our field level source of truth, overwrite, and timing rules? 11, we clean and normalize the data. So we identify any exceptions, which is where we say each field needs to have this type and this format. And that needs to be the case in, let's say, the target system. And then we identify a mechanism for ensuring that normalization occurs. And then 12, we define rectification rules, and we assign owners. So we look at the data, we identify any data that's not normalized, any values that are outside that normalized criteria. That's identify exceptions. And we say, how can these things be rectified? What are the allowable ways to rectify them, right? So for example, if we have phone numbers and they're not formatted with a country code, are we allowed to format those with a country code before they come in? 13, we run the alpha 1 migration, which is the first alpha migration, which is only a minimum viable set of records that prove the full data model that's being brought in. We review that alpha 1 migration, we fix it, and then we run alpha 2, and we do this over and over and over again until there's no more problems. And then number 14, we run the full migration and the full delta migration, which is all the remaining records after the alpha migration. We reconcile all those records, and then if an integration is part of the desired solution design, then we enable the integration. So here are steps 1 through 4 and the inventory structure that must survive. Number 1, we have to take inventory of all the systems and all the objects. So if you're coming from Mailchimp and Salesforce and you're migrating to HubSpot, then Mailchimp, Salesforce, and HubSpot are the systems. Now, in those systems, each of those systems has their own objects. They have their own list of tables that they're bringing over. So we list every source system and source object. We list the targets and the system and the target objects and define what one record represents and whether it is in scope. Then we identify our PK candidates. So for every object, we list our candidate keys. We test each for uniqueness, completeness, stability, and availability. And we select one or record the prerequisite to create one. Okay, so this is where we do our object keys, where we have our object ID. Is it in scope? What's the canonical entity, company, contact, etc.? We identify the business definition. We identify the source system. We identify the source object or table and the source record field, okay, of that ID, of that primary key, right? And then we determine what type is in. Then we say the target system and the target object and the target external field and the load order, okay? And then we also have our way of tracking this for who's approved and who owes it, and then also how many rows have that field. Then we look up associations. So we list every relationship that must be preserved. We state one to many or many to many, and we record the foreign key fields and the association table if required. So here, this is the relationship table where we say the association ID, the parent or left entity, the child or the right entity, what that relationship type is. Is it one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? Is it many-to-one? Or is it many-to-many? Source association object, source parent left key. So this is the primary key, source child right key. This is the foreign key, the target association object, target parent ID. So now we're getting into the source system itself. So we're coming from the target system, I mean. So here in columns A through G, we're talking about source system. Now in H through J, we're talking about target system. Okay. Next, to the load order. We identify the parent and child dependencies, the association table keys, orphan handling, which means that there are objects that should have a parent but don't, and the order that objects and associations must be loaded. So when we talk about order handling, here we're coming back to the order, the load order. Okay. So what do we load first? What do we load last? Then we choose the exact match keys. So for each target object, state the ordered hard match rule. A source primary key can be used only when it is retained and comparable. Store source system and source PK to target PK after load. Okay. So here we're talking about field mapping, where we have our source fields, we have our target fields, and we have our match roles, right? So how are we matching this? We define soft match. or fix the source data. So if the exact identity is missing, first determine whether data can be normalized or a UID can be created before migration. Otherwise, define soft match fields, threshold, ambiguous outcome, and no match outcome. Okay. Here we're talking about migration runs. We're talking about a match merge, right? Here we have the match rule waterfall, where we have the highest match rule, where we have a match type as a hard match, right? And we say we remove punctuation and uppercase this specific field, which is tax ID. We exact normalized tax ID. We have the threshold be exact, and we have the auto match outcome be matched. So this is an automatic rule. But here we have a soft rule, which is name and postal code, right? So we normalize name and address, weighted. We have a specific match. And if that match threshold is, let's say, above 0.92, then we merge. Otherwise, if there's no match, then we create new. This is no match outcome. What happens if there's no match, right? And then we have merge and survivorship rules, which is basically the preferred source, the fallback order, the blank source rule, existing target rule, right? And then recency, conflict tiebreaker is how we handle this in the case of there being conflict or no way to solve these things. So again, here are the rules we use to apply to create a soft match. Here are the rules we have to solve for any remaining records that don't have a soft match. And then finally, we map and transform every field. So we document the source field to the target field, and as well as the source and target type, the transformation, the normalization, the blank and null handling, the required value handling, and rejection behavior. And the output is deterministic instructions for every record in every field. Then we define ongoing integration and clean the data. So we choose one-way or two-way direction for each object in each field. Here we have the integration if we're moving into the integration. So we have the entity and the relationship, the source system, target system, directionality, integration method, trigger cadence, selection and delta rule. So for example, if updated at is above watermark, then create if absence. And the update rule is that the source system wins. Okay. Then we set field level source of truth and overwrite rules. We state, and field level is done on the field mapping, right? Where we say transformation type, transformation rule, validation rule. We have authority and integration. What's the conflict tiebreaker? What's the source of truth? What's the update overwrite rule, right? Then we have choose fixed authority, latest updated, latest created, or another explicit precedence rule. Then we choose event-based updates or polling. We record the cadence and change field, or record cadence and change field. We prevent loops and define conflict outcomes. Then from a data hygiene perspective, we define the type, the format, and allowed value normalization for every field. We identify blank, duplicate, invalid, or non-normalized values. We define how each issue is detected and rectified. We state whether remediation occurs in the source, staging, or target. We assign an owner and due date, and we do not start alpha until blockers are resolved or explicitly accepted. And then finally, we prove the migration and we cut over. We perform an alpha 1 migration. This is where we record here all of our migration runs. We perform an alpha migration. We select a representative sample, write expected results, run the migration, and reconcile records, fields, matches, rejects, and association, ideally to a sandbox if you had it, not into a production account. Number 2, we review and fix. We list every issue. By the way, alpha 1 is sometimes called a rehearsal migration. Number 2, review and fix. We list every issue. We assign an owner. We correct the source data, rule mapping, transformation or configuration that caused whatever issues. Then we rectify it. We perform alpha 2. We repeat that until no known issue remains unresolved, explained, or untested in a later alpha run. And then finally, we have the full delta, where we set a watermark, we run the full migration, we reconcile, we load the delta since the watermark, and then reconcile again, then enable an integration. So exit only when counts, values, identity matches, rejects, and associations reconcile, and remaining exceptions are approved. This is the full process for performing a migration And sometimes migrations are really easy and don't require most of this stuff. Sometimes they're really hard and require all of them. But this will enable us to facilitate 99.99% of migrations or integrations in the HubSpot ecosystem. Thanks so much. If you want us to manage a migration or integration for you, then that's something we can do. We'll go through this exact process with you. You will see this exact spreadsheet and we will apply it to your environment. Thanks very much. Reach out to me. I have a meeting link that you can book with me in the show notes. And I wish you the best of luck in your business.